Hello, and welcome back to the Sleep Alchemist. Tonight, our story begins under the soft, knowing glow of the harvest moon. A time of quiet work, whispered secrets, and long shadows in the countryside. Before we begin our journey, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely find a sense of peace here. And in the comments, I would love to know where in the world you are listening from tonight. It's always a quiet joy to see our community of listeners gathering from all corners of the globe. Now, dim the lights. Find your comfortable space and let your breath slow to the rhythm of the night. Our story begins in the warmth of a stable. My arrival at Blackwood Manor was on a Tuesday in late spring. I remember the quality of the light, a soft, diffuse silver that seemed unique to the English countryside. It filtered through the leaves of the ancient oak trees that line the long, winding drive, painting shifting patterns on the gravel. The air itself felt different here, cleaner, heavier with the scent of damp earth, wild garlic, and the promise of rain. I had come for a rather unique position, one that felt more like a privilege than a job. I am a botanist, and my task for the next 6 months was to catalogue and restore the long-neglected glass houses of the estate. The advertisement had been vague, speaking of a significant collection of historical flora. To me, those words were a siren song. The manor house itself was imposing, a grand stone structure that seemed to grow out of the rolling green hills. It was beautiful, but there was a quiet, melancholic air about it, the kind of deep-set stillness that comes from a history of secrets held within its walls. My work, however, lay beyond the house, at the farthest edge of the formal gardens. It took me nearly 20 minutes to walk there from my small cottage. I walked past perfectly manicured rose gardens, their blooms just beginning to open, past neat rows of hedges and elegant stone fountains that now stood silent. And then, at the end of a winding, overgrown path, I saw it, the greenhouse. It was not one, but a series of interconnected glass pavilions, a magnificent Victorian structure of iron and glass. Or at least, it once was. Now, it looked like a great crystal skeleton being slowly consumed by nature itself. Ivy, thick as a man's arm, snaked up the ironwork. Panes of glass were cracked, some missing entirely, allowing the wild vines from outside to creep in. The once white paint on the iron frame was peeling, revealing the rust beneath like dried blood. It was a place of beautiful, tragic decay, a kingdom that had been lost to time. I found the old, heavy door, its handle a cold, rusted piece of iron. It groaned in protest as I pushed it open, the sound echoing in the vast, silent space within. I stepped inside, and the world changed. The air in here was different. It was thick, warm, and humid, heavy with the rich, complex perfume of life and decay. It smelled of damp earth, of rotting leaves, of 1,000 different kinds of moss, and underneath it all, the sweet, intoxicating scent of a single, resilient flowering vine that had taken over an entire wall. Its white, star-like blossoms, a defiant splash of life in the gloom. Light streamed through the dusty, grimy glass roof high above, not as harsh sunlight, but as soft, ethereal, green-tinted beams, like the light in a cathedral. Dust motes and tiny spores danced in these beams, a swirling, silent galaxy. It was a ruin. Yes, but it was the most beautiful ruin I had ever seen. For the first few days, my work was simply to clear a path, to create a space to begin the long process of cataloguing. I found a small, forgotten potting shed attached to the main structure. It was here, amongst the cobwebs and stacks of terracotta pots, that my true work began, though I did not know it at the time. In the corner of the shed, half buried under a pile of rotted canvas sacks, was a small, sturdy workbench. It was covered in a thick layer of dust and dirt. As I began to wipe it down, my hand brushed against a drawer handle. It was stuck fast with rust and time. With some effort, I managed to pull it open. It came free with a reluctant, grating screech. The drawer was mostly empty, save for a few dried-out seed packets and a rusted trowel, but at the very back, tucked away as if forgotten, was a book. It was a large, heavy ledger, bound in thick, dark green leather, now cracked and faded with age. There was no title on the cover. I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. I placed it on the newly cleaned workbench and gently opened it. The paper inside was thick and of high quality, slightly yellowed at the edges. The first page read, in a strong, neat, and surprisingly elegant hand: The Gardener's Ledger, Blackwood Manor, Arthur Ainsworth, Head Gardener, Anno Domini, 1888. I smiled. This was a treasure, a historical record of the garden. For a botanist like me, this was more valuable than any jewel. I spent the rest of the afternoon, and indeed the next several evenings in my cottage, poring over the ledger. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Arthur was a meticulous and knowledgeable man. His entries were precise. He noted the pH of the soil, the patterns of rainfall, the dates he sowed the seeds for the spring vegetables, the days he pruned the roses in the formal garden. His notes were scientific, practical. He wrote of his daily battles with aphids and black spot, of his pride in a particularly large pumpkin, of his frustration with the late frost. It was a quiet, simple, and strangely beautiful account of a life spent in communion with the earth. I felt a growing respect, a kinship, with this man I would never meet. I was about a third of the way through the book, reading an entry from the spring of 1889, when I found the first anomaly. Tucked carefully between 2 pages was a pressed flower. It was a white camellia, its petals now the color of old cream, but its form was still perfect, a delicate, layered spiral. It was an exquisite specimen, but it was what was on the page beside it that made me stop. Next to Arthur's neat entry about fertilizing the camellia bushes, there was a second set of handwriting. It was completely different from his. Where his was strong and practical, this was slender, elegant, and flowing. The ink was a slightly more faded brown. It was clearly a woman's hand, an educated hand, and it was not a gardening note. It was a single sentence, written in the margin, right next to the description of the white flower. It read, "My admiration remains." I stared at the words. My heart gave a strange little flutter. As a botanist, I had a fondness for the old Victorian language of flowers. It was a secret, romantic code from a time when emotions were not so openly expressed. And I knew, with a sudden, thrilling certainty, what the white camellia meant. It meant perfected loveliness, or more simply, "You are adorable." And her note, "My admiration remains," was a direct, witty, and very personal reply. This was not just a gardener's ledger. I looked around the quiet, sleeping greenhouse. It no longer felt merely abandoned. It felt haunted, but not by ghosts. It was haunted by a secret, a story of a quiet gardener and a high-born lady, a story told not in letters, but in the silent, beautiful language of flowers. My task of restoring this greenhouse had just become something much, much more. I had become the keeper of a secret conversation, and I could not wait to hear what they would say next. My small cottage on the grounds of the estate became a sanctuary within a sanctuary. By day, I worked in the forgotten kingdom of the greenhouse, clearing away the debris of decades, cataloging the resilient survivors. But by night, my true work began. The heavy, leather-bound ledger became my sole companion, its secrets waiting patiently for me under the soft, golden light of my oil lamp. The world outside would fall away, the distant sounds of the manor, the cares of my own simple life, they all vanished. My world shrank to the small circle of light on my wooden table, the smell of old paper and pressed flowers, and the two ghostly voices that spoke to me from the past. I was no longer just a botanist restoring a garden. I was an interpreter, a confidant, piecing together a love story that had refused to turn to dust. Each night became a ritual. I would open the book with the care of a priest, handling a holy text. The discovery of the white camellia and the Lady Eleonora's elegant reply had set my mind alight. I now approached every page with a new, heightened awareness. I was not just reading a gardener's notes, I was searching for a dialogue. A week passed in this fervent, secret study. I learned much about the practical life of Arthur, the gardener. I learned of his battle with black spot on the roses, his pride in the flavor of his heirloom tomatoes, his detailed observations of the nesting habits of the local robins. He was a man deeply connected to the earth, a man of patience and profound observation. And then I found the next message. It was on a page from early summer. Arthur had written a long, detailed entry about planting heliotrope near the main terrace, where the lady of the manor often took her morning tea. He noted its particular characteristic, the way its clusters of small purple flowers would turn throughout the day, always facing the sun. A scientific observation. But in the margin, in his strong, neat script, was a single, poetic line, clearly not meant for a gardener's log. As this flower follows the sun, he had written, so do my eyes follow you. My breath caught in my throat. It was a declaration, so simple, so direct, yet so deeply romantic. And then I saw her reply. In her fine, slender handwriting, tucked just beneath his, was a single word, written in a slightly darker ink, as if she had added it later, with a trembling hand. Devotion. It was a perfect reply. She was not just accepting his compliment, she was answering in the very language he had chosen. In the silent language of flowers, heliotrope means eternal love and devotion. She understood. She had answered his coded message with a code of her own. Their secret dialogue was more intricate than I could have imagined. They were two scholars of the heart, writing a textbook on love that only they could read. I felt a surge of warmth, of happiness for these two souls I had never met. But the story of any true love is never a simple one. A few weeks later in the ledger, the tone shifted. I found a pressed, striped carnation. It was a beautiful flower, its petals a mix of white and a reddish pink that had now faded to a soft brown. But I knew its meaning. In the rigid, complex language of Victorian florography, a striped carnation was not a declaration of love. It was a refusal, a regretful no. I scanned the page, my heart sinking slightly. Arthur's entry was brief and professional, simply noting that the carnations were suffering from a blight. There was no poetic line from him in the margin. There was only her handwriting. Beside the sad, beautiful flower, she had written 2 short, painful sentences. A refusal. Forgive me. It cannot be. I stared at the words, feeling the weight of her regret across the century. A refusal. Why? I could only guess. The great, unbridgeable chasm of their social stations. He was the head gardener. She was the lady of the manor, likely already married to a lord as cold and as imposing as the stone house itself. Their love, nurtured in the secret warmth of the greenhouse, could not survive in the cold, unforgiving light of the world. The story, I thought with a pang of sadness, was over before it had truly begun. I almost closed the book for the night, feeling the familiar sting of a beautiful, tragic story. But I compelled myself to turn one more page, and then one more. For several pages, there were only Arthur's neat, professional notes. The dialogue had ceased. The silence felt heavy, final. And then I found it. Tucked away on a page about soil composition was a delicate, feathery sprig of yellow acacia. It was so small, so unassuming, I almost missed it. But I knew its meaning. It was a flower of profound significance in the secret language. It meant a love that must be concealed, a secret love. And beside it, in Arthur's strong hand, was his reply to her refusal. It was not a plea, it was not a lament. It was a statement of quiet, unshakable fact. Then let it be a secret, our secret. This garden will be our cathedral, and the flowers our silent confidants. Our love will grow here, unseen by the world, but no less true for it. There was no reply from her on this page, no single word of assent, but none was needed. The conversation had changed. He had not accepted her refusal. He had honored it, and then offered a new path, a path through the shadows, a secret garden for a secret love. I closed the ledger for the night, my mind reeling, my heart full. I now understood the stakes. This was not a simple, passing flirtation. It was a deep, dangerous, and now fully committed love affair, hidden in plain sight. Its words disguised as flowers, its cathedral a house of glass and iron at the edge of a forgotten garden. I looked out my cottage window towards the dark, silent silhouette of the greenhouse. It no longer looked like a ruin to me. It looked like a sanctuary, a place where 2 souls had dared to cultivate a love against all odds. And I, the quiet botanist, had become the keeper of their garden, the guardian of their story. I had to know what grew there next. The days grew shorter, the nights longer and colder. My restoration work in the greenhouse became a race against the fading autumn light, and each evening, in the quiet solitude of my small cottage, my journey into the gardener's ledger continued. I had deciphered their silent language, their dialogue of flowers. I had witnessed their secret commitment, a love that chose to bloom in the shadows rather than not bloom at all. I felt I knew them, this quiet, patient gardener and his radiant, trapped lady. I turned the pages of the ledger, moving from the crisp, golden entries of autumn into the sparse, stark entries of winter. The handwriting of Arthur, the gardener, seemed to change. The confident loops and steady lines became tighter, more economical, as if the cold itself had seeped into his ink. The pages were no longer adorned with the ghosts of summer flowers. They were filled with practical, grim notes about wrapping the roots of the rose bushes in burlap, of spreading mulch, of preparing the garden for its long, cold sleep. The colorful dialogue I had been following seemed to have ended with the season. A profound sense of loss washed over me. I had become so invested in their story, and now, it seemed, winter had silenced them, just as it had silenced the garden. I read on, my heart heavy, expecting nothing more than notes on frost and firewood. And then I came to an entry that changed everything. It was dated on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. The entry began, as usual, with a note on the weather. But this time, it was different. It was not just a note. It was a description, a piece of prose. The wind is a blade against the glass of the greenhouse tonight, Arthur had written. A cruel, relentless wind from the north that carries the taste of ice and iron. The world outside is a dead thing, locked in frost. But in here, it is another world. A small, fragile pocket of summer. A memory of life that I'm tasked to keep alive through the long darkness. The furnace must be tended to every hour. The air must remain warm, the humidity a soft breath against the glass. It is all for them, the tropicals, the exotics, and most importantly, for her, the queen of the night, the winter orchid, a creature of impossible delicacy, whose bloom is a rare and sacred promise in the heart of winter. She is beginning to open tonight, and I, her humble keeper, must be here to witness it. My own breath caught in my throat. I read on, my eyes devouring his neat, strong script. The hour is late. The great house is dark and silent. The only sound is the howling of the wind and the steady, reassuring hiss of the furnace. I was adding another log to the fire when I heard it, a sound that did not belong, the soft, metallic click of the secret side door, the one hidden behind the espaliered pear trees. My heart stopped. No one used that door, no one but me, and, on rare occasions, her. She stepped inside, a ghost of winter, her cloak dusted with fine, glittering snow. She closed the door quickly behind her, shutting out the biting wind. She pulled down her hood, and her cheeks were flushed, a brilliant red from the cold. It was Lady Eleonora. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice a small cloud in the warm, humid air. "Forgive the intrusion. I could not sleep. I kept thinking of what you told me about the winter orchid." I simply nodded. my own voice lost somewhere in my throat. I took the lantern from its hook and led her through the narrow paths between the great, dark leaves of the tropical plants. The air in the greenhouse was thick with the scent of damp earth, of moss, and the intoxicating, sweet perfume of the orchids. The glass panes around us were completely fogged with steam, turning our small, warm world into a private, secret island, cut off from the frozen night outside. We reached the far corner where the Queen of the Night resided, and there it was. A single, magnificent white bloom had opened, its petals as delicate as spun silk, a perfect, luminous star in the green darkness. "It is perfect," she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is a fragile thing, my lady," I told her. "It can only bloom here, in this warmth we have made for it, protected from the world outside. Its beauty is a defiance of the season." I saw her look away from the flower and at me, and in her eyes I saw a flicker of understanding, a shared secret knowledge that we were no longer talking about the orchid. May I touch it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You must be careful," I said. "Its petals bruise easily." I took her hand to guide it. Her fingers were like ice in my own warm, earth-stained hand. I led her finger to the very edge of a single petal, letting her feel its impossible softness. In that moment, there was only the touch of her skin against mine, the contrast of her cold, delicate hand, and my own, rough and warm. The world shrank to that single point of contact. The great house, her lord husband, my own lowly station. It all disappeared. There was only us, a man and a woman, standing together in a fragile, man-made summer, in the heart of a bitter winter. She did not pull her hand away. I did not let it go. I turned her small, cold hand over in mine, and I cradled it, warming it between my palms. "Your hands are always so warm, Arthur," she murmured, her gaze fixed on our joined hands. "It is the earth," I replied, my voice thick. "I have spent my life with my hands in the soil." She looked up at me then, and the sadness I so often saw in her eyes was replaced by something else, a longing, a deep, profound, and unguarded yearning. The steamy air swirled around us. The scent of the orchid was intoxicating. The only sound was the hiss of the furnace and the soft patter of melting snow dripping from the glass roof. Slowly, as if in a dream, I raised her hand and gently pressed my lips to her cold fingertips. A gesture of reverence, a prayer. She closed her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips. And then she leaned forward into the small space that separated our two worlds, and she kissed me. It was a quiet kiss, a gentle kiss. It was not a kiss of fire and passion, but one of profound tenderness, of a shared, secret understanding. It tasted of the cold night air on her lips, and of the warm, fragrant earth of our shared sanctuary. It was a moment out of time, a perfect, impossible bloom in the dead of winter. The entry in the ledger ends there. After that beautiful, aching confession, Arthur simply wrote, in a slightly unsteady hand, "Tonight, the winter orchid bloomed." I look up from the book, my own cheeks feeling warm. I can almost feel the humid air of that long-forgotten greenhouse, almost smell the ghost of that exotic flower. The ledger has just given up its deepest secret, a secret not of refusal or of longing, but of a love that found its own brief, beautiful, and impossible season, hidden away from the world in a small sanctuary of glass and steam. The discovery of that secret meeting in the winter greenhouse marked the heart of the gardener's ledger. It was the story's emotional peak, a single, perfect bloom of warmth and intimacy in a world of cold duty. As I continued to turn the pages, I felt as though I was now walking down the other side of the mountain. The air grew thinner, the light a little less bright. For a few more years, their silent conversation continued. I found a pressed sprig of lavender for devotion, and a small, delicate bluebell, a symbol of constancy. His notes were less poetic now, more observational. Her replies were shorter, sometimes just a single, beautiful word. Their love had not vanished, but it seemed to have retreated, settling into a quiet, comfortable rhythm, a gentle ember rather than a blazing fire. The entries became more sparse. Entire seasons would pass with only Arthur's notes on weather patterns and soil conditions. The elegant, slender handwriting of Lady Eleonora appeared less and less frequently. I would turn a page and find only his writing, and my heart would ache with a strange sense of disappointment. I felt the distance growing between them, a chasm of unspoken goodbyes widening with each empty margin. I searched for a reason. Did her husband, the Lord, become suspicious? Did she grow tired of their secret arrangement? The book offered no answers. It only offered the quiet, sad evidence of a slow fading. Like a flower closing its petals at dusk, their connection seemed to be retreating into itself, preparing for the inevitable night. I reached the final few pages of the ledger. They were mostly empty. The last dated entry from Arthur was from the autumn of 1895, a simple note about the final harvest of apples. After that, there was nothing, only blank, yellowed pages. But I turned one last page, and there I found the final entry. It was written years later. The ink was a different shade of black, and his handwriting, once so strong and steady, was now thin and slightly shaky, the writing of an old man. There was no date. There was no mention of the weather. There was no pressed flower. There was only a single, heartbreaking sentence, written in the center of the vast, empty page. He did not write that she had passed away. He did not write that she had left the manor forever. He wrote only 7 words, an epitaph not for a person, but for their entire hidden world. This year, he wrote, the last winter, orchid withered, and that was all. The rest of the book was silent. I closed the ledger. The story was over. The silence in my small cottage felt immense, profound. The winter orchid, the symbol of their fragile, protected love, was gone. And with it, so was she. Their secret garden had finally been reclaimed by the unyielding frost of reality. A great sadness welled up inside me, a sadness for 2 people I had never met, for a love I had only witnessed through dried flowers and faded ink. The next morning, I did not go about my usual work of cataloguing. I walked with a new purpose to the greenhouse. It was a bright, clear day, and the sun streamed through the dusty glass panes, illuminating the chaos of green within. I made my way to the far corner of the structure, the place I had read about, the place that had once been a sanctuary for the tropical orchids. It was in disrepair. The old heating pipes were rusted and broken. The benches were rotted. But in the rich, dark soil, a few hardy ferns still grew. I knelt down, my hands sinking into the cool, damp earth. I felt a sense of connection, a sense of duty. This place could not be allowed to die. Their story could not be allowed to simply wither away. My work changed that day. The restoration of the greenhouse was no longer just a scientific project. It became a personal mission. I spent weeks clearing that corner, mending the pipes, replacing the rotten wood, enriching the soil. I was not just restoring a section of a glass house. I was rebuilding a shrine. And then, when the work was done, I planted a new orchid. A small, delicate bulb, full of the promise of a beauty yet to come. I placed it in a new terracotta pot, in the exact spot where I imagined the winter orchid had once bloomed. It was a small, simple act, a quiet promise to the ghosts of the garden, a promise that their secret was not forgotten, that their love, in some small way, would continue to grow. Now, my time at Blackwood Manor is coming to an end. The greenhouse is no longer a ruin, but a place of quiet, ordered beauty. I am sitting here, in that very corner, on a simple wooden bench as dusk settles over the gardens. The air is warm and humid, and it carries the sweet, heady scent of the flowers around me. And in the pot before me, my orchid, the one I planted months ago, has just opened its first, magnificent bloom. I look at its perfect, delicate petals, and I think of Arthur and Eleonora. I no longer feel sadness for them. I feel a profound sense of peace. Their love story did not end in tragedy. It simply transformed. It became a part of the history of this garden, its memory seeping into the very soil. It left behind a legacy, a seed of beauty that, with a little care, could bloom once more. The last rays of the setting sun slant through the glass, painting the room in soft, golden light. My thoughts begin to slow, to soften. The world outside disappears. There is only the warmth, the quiet, the gentle perfume of the flowers, a legacy of a secret love, a garden of memory, a beautiful, quiet place to rest, to dream, to sleep. Some love stories are not grand epics written in stone, but quiet gardens, cultivated in secret, whose beauty can bloom again, long after the gardeners themselves are gone. Thank you for tending to this secret garden with us tonight. I hope its story of quiet devotion and enduring beauty has brought you a sense of peace. May your rest be deep, and may your own heart find a place where its most beautiful flowers can bloom. Sleep well. My grandfather's shop did not smell like other places. It did not carry the scent of baking bread or cut flowers or the clean scent of rain on a city street. His shop smelled of time itself. It was a complex perfume of old, dry wood, the faint, sharp tang of brass polish, and the clean, mineral scent of lubricating oil. It was the smell of my childhood, the smell of a world contained, a universe in miniature. I stand now in the center of that universe, but its creator is gone. My grandfather, Anselm, passed away last week, and the task of sorting through his life's work has fallen to me. The shop is exactly as he left it. It is a small, cluttered space, tucked away on a quiet, cobblestone street in a city that has long since grown loud and modern around it. But here, inside these four walls, time seems to slow. It seems to sleep. The air is still. The dominant sound is the one I have known my entire life. The soft, unsynchronized ticking of dozens of clocks. It is not a noise. It is a gentle, mechanical rain. A room full of tiny, metallic heartbeats, each one keeping its own steady, patient rhythm. There are grand father clocks standing like silent wooden soldiers against the walls, their pendulums swinging in slow, hypnotic arcs. There are ornate mantle clocks on every shelf, their porcelain faces painted with delicate flowers. And under glass domes, on every surface, are the exposed beating hearts of clockworks, their tiny gears and springs moving in a beautiful, intricate, and never-ending dance. My grandfather was a man much like his clocks, quiet, patient, meticulous. He was a man of few words, but his hands were poets. I would spend hours as a child sitting on a low stool in the corner, watching him work. I'd watch as he, with a jeweler's loop pressed to his eye, would coax life back into a watch that had been silent for 50 years. He would use tiny, specialized tools that looked like a surgeon's instruments, moving with a reverence and a focus that was a form of prayer. He did not just repair timepieces. He healed them. He understood their secret language. Now, it is my job to catalog them, to decide what to keep, what to sell, what to give away. It feels like a betrayal. Each clock, each watch holds a story, and I am here to put a price on them. I begin at his workbench. It is a magnificent piece of oak, scarred and stained with the oils and chemicals of 60 years of work. His tools are laid out with a startling precision, tiny screwdrivers arranged by size, small brass hammers, vials of oil, a worn leather strap for polishing. Everything is in its place, everything except him. I run my hand over the smooth, cool wood. My heart aches with a familiar, dull grief. I miss his silence. I miss his quiet, focused presence in this room. I begin the sad task of opening the drawers. The first few are as I expected, neatly organized compartments filled with spare gears, tiny screws, hands of all shapes and sizes. But the bottom drawer, the largest one, is stuck. I pull on the small brass handle, but it does not budge. I assume it is just swollen with the summer humidity. I pull harder, and I hear a faint click from within the desk. Not the sound of wood giving way, but of a mechanism releasing. Curiosity replaces my grief for a moment. I peer under the desk. My fingers find a small, hidden wooden button tucked away in the shadows. I press it. With another soft click, the drawer I was pulling slides open an inch. But it is not the drawer. It is a false front. Behind it, a second, hidden drawer, a secret compartment, slides out. My heart quickens. My grandfather was a man of precision, but not, I thought, a man of secrets. The drawer is lined with dark blue velvet, now faded and worn. and resting in the center is not a tool or a collection of rare parts. It is another box, a small, beautiful casket made of a dark, polished cherry wood with a small, tarnished silver latch. It is clearly very old and very precious. With trembling hands, I lift the box out. It is surprisingly heavy. I place it on the workbench in the single pool of light from the desk lamp. For a moment, I just look at it, a wave of reverence washing over me. This was my grandfather's secret, his treasure. I unlatch the box. The hinges make no sound. I lift the lid, and I forget to breathe. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, is a pocket watch. But it is unlike any I have ever seen. The casing is made of heavy, polished gold, intricately engraved with swirling patterns of leaves and stars. It is a masterpiece, the kind of work that would take a lifetime to create. It is a piece worthy of a king. But that is not what takes my breath away. I lift it from the box. It is heavy, cool in my palm. I open the front cover. The face of the watch is a brilliant, clean plate of white enamel. The numbers are elegant Roman numerals, painted in a deep, beautiful blue. The small, intricate second hand is there, but the main hands, the hour and minute hands, are missing. The face is empty, a beautiful, perfect, timeless void. And beneath the enamel, visible through its translucent surface, is the watch's heart, a breathtakingly complex city of tiny, gleaming gears, spinning wheels, and jewel-like pivots. I can see the balance wheel oscillating back and forth, a tiny, frantic heartbeat. The mechanism is alive. It is working perfectly. It is keeping time. But it has no way to tell it. I stare at it, completely bewildered. My grandfather was the master, a perfectionist, a man who would spend a week regulating a clock until it was accurate to within a second a month. Why would he create his magnum opus, this masterpiece of his art, and leave it unfinished? Why would he build a perfect heart and give it no voice? It makes no sense. It is a contradiction to everything I know about him. It is a beautiful, perfect, and deeply unsettling mystery, a story with no ending, a clock that is alive, but forever silent. I turn the watch over in my hand, my thumb tracing the smooth, cool gold of the back casing. I feel a small, almost imperceptible line, an edge that should not be there. It is a seam, a second, hidden lid. My heart begins to pound again. With my fingernail, I find the edge and carefully, gently, pry it open. It swings open on a tiny, silent hinge, and there, on the inner surface of the secret lid, in the most exquisite, microscopic script I have ever seen, is the answer, or rather, the beginning of an answer. It is a single line of engraved poetry, and beneath it, a single, mysterious initial. My breath catches in my throat. I hold the golden watch closer to the warm, focused light of the desk lamp. There, on the inner surface of the secret back casing, are the words. They are not a name, or a date, or a dedication from a client. They are words of pure poetry, engraved with a hand so steady and so fine it seems impossible. I read them again, my lips forming the silent shapes of the words. until time itself stops. And beneath that impossible promise, a single, elegant initial, also engraved with the same loving care, H. I stare at the inscription for a long time, my mind a quiet storm of confusion. Who is H? And what does this promise mean? My grandfather, Anselm, was a man of logic, of mechanics, of quiet, tangible things. He was a man who believed in the steady, unforgiving march of time, a march he measured and mended every day of his life. He was not a man of grand, poetic declarations, or so I had thought. This watch, this silent, beautiful, incomplete masterpiece, was a contradiction to the man I knew. And this inscription, this was a key to a room in his heart I never knew existed, a secret I now felt compelled to unlock. I gently closed the secret lid, the small click of the mechanism seeming loud in the quiet shop. I placed the watch back in its velvet box as if it were a sleeping thing I did not wish to wake. My mission now is clear. I must find her. I must find H. My search begins where his life was recorded, in the tall, dusty bookshelf that holds his work ledgers. They are magnificent, leather-bound volumes, one for every year of his 50-year career. I pull down the one from what I guess was his middle period, around the 1970s. The spine creaks as I open it. The pages are filled with his neat, precise handwriting. It is a history of his work, a quiet testament to his dedication. Monday, repaired the escapement on Mrs. Gable's mantel clock. Mainspring was fatigued. Wednesday, cleaned and oiled the movement of the mayor's grandfather clock. A fine German piece, but neglected. Page after page of technical notes, of diagrams of gears and pendulums. A history of his hands, but not of his heart. I feel a pang of disappointment. Perhaps the inscription was just a whim after all, a line from a book he once read. I continue to turn the pages, the dry, papery sound, a soft rhythm in the ticking silence. My eyes scan the entries, no longer reading, just looking for anything out of the ordinary. And then I find it. It is an entry from a Tuesday in July 1975. The technical note is simple. Finish the regulation of the Baron's astronomical clock. But beneath it, in a slightly different, more fluid script, is a personal note, a rare thing. I have to lean close to the page to read it. Helene came with him to collect it, he wrote. She stood by the window, where the afternoon sun caught the gold in her hair. When the clock chimed for the first time, she laughed. A sound like small silver bells. For a moment, her laughter was the only sound that mattered. For a moment, it made all the other clocks in this shop, in the entire world, fall silent. My hand stills on the page. Helene, the Baron's wife, his best friend's wife, H. The pieces click into place with a terrible, beautiful clarity. The secret was not just a romance, it was a forbidden one, a love that had to live in the margins of his life, just like this note lived in the margin of his ledger. With a new, trembling sense of purpose, I begin to search for more. But the work ledgers reveal nothing else. They are a fortress of professionalism. The secret, I realize, would not be kept here. It would be kept somewhere more personal. My eyes scan the cluttered workshop, and I see it. On a low shelf, behind a row of technical manuals, is a different kind of book. It is smaller, bound not in sturdy work leather, but in soft, dark green suede. It has no title. I have never seen it before. With a feeling of both reverence and transgression, I take the book to the workbench. This feels different. The ledgers will work. This feels like a diary. I open it. It is his design journal. Page after page is filled with the most intricate, beautiful drawings of clockworks and watch movements. But these are not repairs. These are new creations. His own designs. And as I turn the pages, I see one design begin to dominate. A complex, beautiful pocket watch. The pocket watch. The one resting in the cherry wood box beside me. And here, in this private book, the notes are not technical. They are personal. They are confessions. I find a page with a detailed drawing of the watch's movement. He is planning the placement of the jewels, the tiny ruby bearings that reduce friction. And in the margin, he has written, I have chosen a Burmese ruby for the main balance jewel, not for its quality, which is excellent, but for its color. A deep, pigeon blood red. It is the exact color of that single drop of blood on her fingertip, that day she pricked it with a sewing needle. A tiny, perfect wound. A tiny, perfect gem. I feel a shiver run through me. I am reading his soul. I turn another page. A detailed drawing of the ornate golden case. The note beside it reads, the curve of the casing must be perfect. It must mimic the gentle, graceful curve of her shoulder as she leans over her book to read. Strong, yet delicate. A line of perfect, simple beauty. I continue to turn the pages, my heart pounding with each new revelation. He writes of the complex inner workings, the dozens of tiny, interacting gears. The movement must be mysterious, one note says. It must be complex and intricate and beautiful, even in its hiddenness. It must be like her mind. I, the grandson, the boy who saw only a quiet, simple old man, am now seeing the truth. I am seeing a man possessed by a great, all-consuming and impossible love. This watch was not a piece of machinery. It was a reliquary. It was his cathedral, built in secret, to honor his one true saint. The act of creating it was his only way to touch her, to possess her, to spend time with her. It was the most intimate act of his life, a love affair conducted not with bodies, but with gears and springs and tiny, precious jewels. I look from the open journal to the watch itself, now resting on its velvet bed. It is no longer an object of mystery. It is an object of profound, heart-breaking devotion. I no longer see it as an unfinished work. I am beginning to understand that its silence, its lack of hands to mark the passing of time, might be the most important part of its design. And the thought sends another, deeper chill through me. The design journal lies open before me, its pages filled with the secret heart of my grandfather. I feel like an intruder, a reader of a diary never meant for my eyes. The man I knew was one of a quiet and simple discipline. The man in these pages was a poet, a philosopher, a lover of breathtaking devotion. He did not build a watch. He built a shrine to a woman named Helene. He built a universe in miniature and placed her at its center. Gently, I close the suede-bound journal. Its secrets are too heavy to absorb all at once. I place it beside the beautiful, unfinished watch. The two objects seem to hum with a silent energy, a story waiting for its final chapters to be understood. My hand, almost of its own accord, drifts back to the wooden memory box. It searches for something more solid, more real than the drawings and words. My fingers close around something hard, cold, and unyielding. I lift it out. It is a single key. It is not an ornate key, like one that might open a treasure chest. It is a simple, heavy iron key for a common apartment door. Its edges have been softened by years of use, and a fine layer of reddish rust has begun to claim the metal. It does not look like a key to a happy memory. It feels like a key to a life, a real life, with all its joys and its inevitable, quiet sorrows. Holding it, the coldness of the iron seems to seep into my bones, and the quiet, ticking sanctuary of the shop around me dissolves. The gentle rhythm of dozens of clocks is replaced by a different kind of drumming, the constant, chaotic, and wonderfully alive sound of the city. The key was for a small apartment on the third floor of a brick building in a city that felt, to a boy from the mountains like my grandfather, like a different planet. After that first summer of discovery, after another year of stolen weekends and long-distance letters filled with a longing that was almost a physical pain, he had made a choice. He had followed her. He had followed his Helene to the city where she was pursuing her own dreams, her own ambitions. I remember him telling me stories, not of her, but of that time. He spoke of it as his great adventure. I see it now through his eyes, through the lens of this cold iron key. I can see the day they got this key, the sheer, unadulterated joy of it. The apartment was tiny. The paint on the walls was peeling in some places. The old wooden floors creaked with every step, and the single, large window looked out, not onto a rolling hill or a quiet lake, but onto the beautifully grim brick wall of the neighboring building. But to them, it was a palace. It was the first place that was truly, completely theirs. A small island of their own in the middle of a vast, roaring sea of a city. I can imagine them with almost no furniture, a simple mattress on the floor, a wobbly card table, and two mismatched chairs they probably found on the street and carried up the 3 flights of stairs themselves, laughing all the way. But they filled that small space with other things, more important things. They filled it with books, stacked high against the walls, until the books themselves became a kind of furniture. They filled it with the rich, comforting smell of brewing coffee in the morning and the simple, delicious scent of pasta with garlic and oil at night. And they filled it with their art. Her corner was for her studies, for the books on history and art that she loved. His corner was a miniature version of this very workshop, a small, sturdy table by the window with his tiny tools laid out on a piece of leather, and a single, bright lamp under which he would work for hours, mending the broken timepieces of the city dwellers. The intimacy they shared then was different from the wild, secret passion of a camping trip under the stars. It was a new kind of intimacy, a domestic intimacy, the quiet, comfortable rhythm of a shared life. It was in the way she would put a fresh cup of strong, black coffee on his desk without a word when he had been hunched over a particularly difficult watch movement for hours. It was in the way he would gently place a blanket over her shoulders when she had fallen asleep reading in her chair. It was in the quiet comfort of sitting together on their mattress on the floor late at night, not talking, just reading their own books, their shoulders touching, two separate, silent worlds existing peacefully together in the small pool of light from a single lamp. Yes, love was here in this small apartment. It was a strong and steady thing. But the city was a constant, low hum in the background, a third presence in their relationship. And it was a presence that spoke to each of them in a different language. For Clara, the city was a song of endless possibility. She thrived in it. She loved the energy, the anonymity, the feeling of being a small part of a great, sprawling, human story. I found a journal entry of his from this time. He wrote, "Today, Helene received a position at the City Museum. To see her face when she told me, it was like watching a flower that had been in shadow finally turn towards the sun. She came alive in this city. She was meant for its light, its noise, its grand galleries. I have never seen her so happy, but for him, the city's song was a dissonant chord. He, a man of the mountains, a man who found peace in the silence between the ticking of clocks, felt trapped." I found another entry, written only a few months later. "The noise here," he wrote, "is a constant grinding in my soul. It is the sound of a machine that never stops. I find myself standing at the window, not looking at anything, just listening for a sound that isn't there, the sound of wind in the pine trees, the sound of a river over stones, the sound of true silence. My hands know how to mend the broken hearts of clocks, but I do not know how to mend the homesickness in my own." His sketchbooks from that time, which I found tucked away at the bottom of the chest, are filled with drawings of towering, lonely trees, of vast, empty landscapes, and of small, isolated cabins, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. He was drawing this very cabin, decades before he would build it. He was drawing a life he was not living. He was drawing a home his heart longed for. The first real crack in their perfect world appeared on a quiet Sunday afternoon. It wasn't a fight. Fights are for people who still have the energy to shout, for people who still believe they can change the other person's mind. This was something quieter and far more dangerous. It was a conversation of two sad, divergent truths. She was telling him about a new exhibit she was helping to curate at the museum, a collection of Renaissance art. Her eyes were shining with intellectual passion. She spoke of Florence, of Rome, of the possibility of traveling, of studying the great masters. He was sitting at his workbench, sketching. It was another drawing of the cabin. "That's wonderful, Clara," he said, and I know he meant it. He was always her greatest admirer. "Imagine all the things you'll see." "We'll see," she corrected him gently. "Imagine all the things we'll see, Jack." He stopped drawing. He looked at the half-finished sketch of the cabin, with its porch and its stone chimney, a place of profound peace. And then he looked out the window at the endless, unyielding brick wall. "I don't know if I can live in another city, Helene," he said, his voice quiet. I don't think I am built for them. My soul is quiet. It needs silence to be able to hear itself think. The light in her eyes dimmed. It did not go out, but it softened with a sudden understanding, a deep sadness. She came and sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. The silence that fell between them was not the comfortable silence of two people reading side by side. It was a new silence, a silence filled with the weight of two different, beautiful, and incompatible dreams. "I love you, Anselm," she said, her voice soft but sure. "But I cannot be small anymore. I have spent my whole life in a small town with small dreams. This city, this world, it's finally opening up to me. I want to see all of it. I want to learn all of it." "And I love you," he replied, his own voice thick with a sadness he couldn't hide. "So much that I followed you here. But I think my world has been too large for too long. The mountains, the forests. I just want to make my world smaller now. Small enough to fit on one patch of land. Small enough to be peaceful." It was a conversation without a solution. A declaration not of a lack of love, but of a difference in souls. They were two masterfully crafted timepieces, working perfectly on their own. But their rhythms, their very mechanics, were designed for different worlds, and they were beginning to realize, with a quiet, shared heartbreak, that they could not be calibrated to tick in unison forever. The iron key in my hand is cold now. It was the key to their first home, a place of immense joy and hope. But it was also the key to the door that, once opened, revealed the two different paths that lay before them. The path to the world and the path to the woods. It was the key that unlocked the beginning of their end. The iron key feels cold in my palm, a cold piece of a past that was once so warm. It was the key to a home, but a home is more than just walls and a roof. A home must be a shared direction, and their directions, my grandfather Anselm's and his Helena's, had begun to point towards different horizons, towards different, lonely skies. I gently placed the key back amongst the other ghosts in the wooden box. My fingers, almost against my will, continue their search, brushing past the smooth river stone, past the soft, brittle petals of the mountain daisy. My hand searches for the final artifact, the one I dread, and yet the one that makes the story complete. My fingers close around it at the very bottom of the box. It is an envelope. The paper is no longer white, but a deep, creamy yellow, the color of aged ivory. It is brittle at the edges, and I handle it with the care of a man touching a sacred relic. On the front, my name, Anselm, is written in her beautiful, familiar, flowing script. The ink has faded from a bold black to a soft, watery brown over the long decades. The wax seal on the back was broken only once, on a lonely, snowbound night many years ago, and then carefully put back in its place. I don't need to open it again. I know its contents by heart. The words are carved into my memory just as surely as my grandfather's name is carved on the old tree down by the stream. Just touching this brittle paper is enough. The quiet, ticking shop around me dissolves. The scent of oil and old wood vanishes, and I am transported back one last time to the final day. The memory is not of a storm, but of a quiet, grey afternoon in their small city apartment. The air was heavy with unspoken words and the sad, practical smell of cardboard boxes and packing tape. She was leaving. It was a fact that hung in the air, as solid and as undeniable as the brick wall outside their window. There had been no final, dramatic fight. The battles had all been fought, not with raised voices, but with quiet, weary conversations that lasted late into the night. The war was over, and they had both lost. What remained was the sad, necessary business of signing the treaty. I remember the scene as if I was there. She is carefully folding one of his shirts, one he had left behind, and placing it in a box for him to take. Her movements are slow, deliberate, graceful even in this final, heartbreaking act of separation. "You will build your cabin, won't you, Anselm?" she asks, her back to him. Her voice is soft, steady. "It's the only thing I know how to do now," he replies, his voice a low rumble. He is standing by the window, looking out at the city he has come to despise. She turns to face him, a sad, knowing smile on her lips. "That's not true. You know how to build miracles out of gears and springs. You know how to build time. And you," he says, turning from the window to look at her, his eyes full of a love that is now intertwined with pain. "You will go to Florence. You will see the art of the great masters. You will become one of them." "It's the only thing I know how to do," she replies, echoing his own words. And in that echo, there is a universe of shared understanding. They are not breaking up because their love has failed. They are parting because their souls are designed for different worlds. The intimacy of that moment was almost unbearable. It was not the warmth of a shared sleeping bag or the passion of a stolen kiss. It was the terrible intimacy of two people who know each other so completely that they can see the future and know with absolute certainty that it does not contain them both. It is the intimacy of a shared, heartbreaking truth. She walks over to him. She reaches out and straightens the collar of his shirt. A small, simple, wifely gesture that holds a world of love and loss. And then she gives him the letter. She pulls the sealed envelope from the pocket of her traveling coat and presses it into his hand. "Don't read this now," she says softly, her fingers lingering on his for a fraction of a second too long. "Take it with you. When you have built your cabin, the one you are always drawing, when the roof is on and the fire is lit for the first time, read it then. Read it and remember that what we had was real and it was beautiful." And then she does the hardest thing of all. She lets go of his hand. She picks up her single suitcase, turns and walks to the door. She pauses, her hand on the knob, but she does not look back. "Be happy, Anselm," she whispers to the door, and then she is gone. The sound of the apartment door closing is not loud, but it is the loudest sound he has ever heard. It echoes in the sudden, deafening silence of the room, a room that is now just a collection of boxes and memories, a room that is no longer a home. I am back in the workshop. The letter is in my hand. The ticking of the clock surrounds me, and now, finally, I understand. I look from the letter to the beautiful, unfinished watch resting in its velvet box, and the final piece of the puzzle, the piece I have been missing my whole life, slides into place with a quiet, perfect click. He never finished it. Not because he ran out of time, not because he was overcome with grief. He never finished it because that was his intention. It was his final, most brilliant, most heartbreaking act of devotion. To put hands on the watch would be to start its clock, to allow it to measure the seconds, the minutes, the hours, to condemn it to the same relentless forward march of time that had taken her from him. To put hands on the watch would mean that their time, like all time, would eventually run out. By leaving it without hands, he froze their love in a perfect, eternal present. The watch was not meant to tell time. It was meant to hold time. It was a vessel for their perfect summer, for their time in the tent under the stars, for the life they built in their small apartment. Inside its golden case, she is forever laughing. He is forever watching her. Their time together never ends. It is a masterpiece, not because it is incomplete, but because it is eternal. A profound sense of peace washes over me. The quiet, simple man I knew as my grandfather was, in his own way, one of the great romantic heroes of history. His grand gesture was not a battle or a kingdom. It was a small, silent, perfect act of rebellion against time itself. I gently, reverently placed the final letter back into the box. I closed the lid, its soft click, a final, gentle amen. I do not hide the box away in the secret drawer. I place it in the center of his workbench, a place of honor, a testament to a life of quiet passion. I lean back in my chair. The ticking of 100 clocks no longer sounds chaotic. It sounds like a symphony of 100 different stories, 100 different lives, all moving forward. But my focus is on the profound, perfect silence of the one watch that stands outside of time. I close my eyes. The workshop is warm. The memories are at peace. The love story has been told, and I am grateful. Grateful for a love so great it could stop time. My thoughts begin to slow, to soften, to merge with the gentle rhythmic ticking that fills the room. A soft tick, a quiet talk, a steady beat, like a heart, a peaceful, resting heart, a quiet, steady peace, a final, gentle sleep. The most beautiful timepieces are not the ones that tell us the hour. They are the ones that remind us of the moments that are timeless. Thank you for listening to this story of a love that defied time. I hope it has brought you a sense of peace and a quiet appreciation for your own precious memories. May your night be calm and your dreams be eternal. Sleep well.